Welcome to the Nursing Post podcast, All Nursing All the Time with Ashley Moore and Rosa Horsley. In this episode, we discuss migraines and one of the new options to treat them, Botox. And since the FDA has only approved Botox for adults, this podcast will focus only on adults. Our goal is always to inform and start conversation.
So Botox isn't just for wrinkles anymore. The FDA approved Botox in 2010 for treatment of chronic migraines. For adults, a chronic migraine means having a headache for at least 15 days of the month, 8 of those headaches being migraines, and the migraines that last 4 or more hours, and that goes on for 3 months. We typically do not focus on one singular item or treatment option, but we haven't heard a lot about this and it's a little unorthodox. So we thought we'd give it a shot.
Now, I will say what spiked my interest were the commercials. Like, I knew that this was a treatment before because I do suffer from migraines. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you a funny story when we start rolling on about that. But the reason why we wanted to bring this to the forefront is because literally when you turn on the TV now, this is all that you see is Botox for migraines, Botox for this, Botox for that.
There are a bunch of statistics that we have pulled for migraines. It was eye-opening to me, and I had some opinions about it, I'll be honest with you. Migraine is the third most prevalent illness in the world.
Now, that's surprising to me.
That nearly 1 in 4 U.S. households includes somebody that suffers from migraines. 12% of the population, and this includes children, suffer from migraines. 18% of American women, 6% of men, and 10% of children experience migraines. It does affect about 28 million women in the United States. 85% of chronic migraine sufferers are women. Migraines are more common between the ages of 18 and 44. 90% of migraine sufferers have a family history of migraines. It is the 6th most disabling illness in the world.
Wow.
Every 10 seconds, somebody in the United States goes to the ER complaining of head pain, and 1.2 million visits are for acute migraine attack. While most sufferers experience attacks once or twice a month, for more than 4 million people that have chronic daily migraines with at least 15 migraine days per month, which I just couldn't even, that makes sense why it's so disabling.
Well, yeah, I don't know if you suffer from migraines or if you've ever had one, but, and I know we're going to probably discuss this later on.
Right.
We're talking about being sensitive to sound, being sensitive to light, being nauseous, even to the point where it can cause vomiting. And when you're in the climax of that migraine, it is disabling because you can't do anything. Even motion makes you sick.
Right. Well, I don't and never have really had a migraine, but my husband does. And I know that it's, lights out in the bedroom, door closed, and just leave them alone.
Blackout blinds, the whole 9 yards.
About 25% of migraine sufferers also have visual disturbances. We call that an aura. 15 to 20% of attacks, other neurological symptoms may occur before that head pain. So this is, I guess, nice because it's going to happen. If you have medicine to take for acute attacks, that would be the time to do it. 20% of chronic migraine sufferers are disabled. 1 in 4 women will experience a migraine in their lifetime. 3 times as many women suffer from migraines versus men. Half of female sufferers have more than 1 attack each month, and a quarter have 4 or more attacks per month. And I wonder if that's related to hormones.
Yeah, I wonder if it's cycle related.
Mm-hmm. Severe and more frequent attacks often result from fluctuation of estrogen levels.
Bingo.
There you go. Half of all migraine sufferers have their first attack before the age of 12. And these have actually been reported in kids as young as 18 months, which is awful.
I don't know how they would be able to even communicate that.
And recently, infant colic was found to be associated with childhood migraine.
Wow.
So they're wondering,
there's some correlation there.
Yep. And healthcare cost and loss of productivity costs associated with migraines, $36 billion yearly just in the United States.
But I can believe that if if you are paying for migraine medication, you'll realize that for as needed, insurance companies will only pay now anywhere for only 6 pills a month.
Right.
And they're expensive. They're not cheap.
Yes. The medical cost of treating was more than $5.4 billion, and the patients, the people that suffer from this, spent over $41 billion in treating, through their entire life. This is ridiculous.
It is.
And healthcare costs are 70% higher for a family with a migraine sufferer than ones that are not affected. More than 157 million workdays are lost each year in the U.S. due to migraines.
That's astonishing to me.
It's just crazy. More than $1 billion are spent doing brain scans.
And that's because sometimes the symptoms of a migraine can be confused for those of a stroke.
Those who suffer from chronic illnesses experience higher costs, that we know about it. And a lot of times they get not as much support, and migraine sufferers are, looped into that category. More than half of all migraine patients have never been diagnosed, officially. The vast majority of patients don't seek medical care for their pain, and 4% of patients who seek medical care get a care consult for a headache or pain specialist. 4% are like, hey, let's actually get you to somebody specific for this problem. Mm-hmm. So you come in with a heart attack, cardiology, you're done. Yeah. You come in with pneumonia, pulmonary, you're done. Yeah. Come in with a stroke, neurology, good. Come in with a migraine, yeah, you're all right. In 2017, the NIH funding for migraine research, listen, y'all, 50 cents per patient.
And we just went up here, if you look back, and there's a lot more people who suffer from migraines than
a lot of other chronic illnesses. So that's crazy. And so the Migraine Research Foundation, that was founded in 2016, is trying to address the lack of funding. Since 2006, the Migraine Research Foundation has rewarded 76 grants and supported 98 investigators in 12 countries just to try to get some basic science, genetics, childhood migraine information, and new therapies and things like that. I'll be honest, my first thought was, why is there such this huge discrepancy, where things aren't, I just feel like treatment's not being escalated.
Well, I think I have many thoughts, but one of them I think is cost. Mm-hmm. We do have a lot of people who are uninsured. Like I said, I have as needed meds on hand for my migraines. The pharmacy will only give you 6 pills a month. You're saying, the minimum is 4 and the max is 15.
Well, and that's just to be labeled as chronic migraine.
That they're having at least 4 a month, but can total 15 days. And so if pharmacy is only giving you 6 pills out of insurance, then you can only imagine for somebody who's suffering those 15 days out of the month, what the out-of-pocket expense is.
Oh, yeah.
And mind you, there are daily,
one medicine.
Yeah, and there are some daily oral meds that you can take, of course, that we'll talk about later. And, there's also injections and a bunch of other, and the Botox that we're talking about in specific for today's podcast.
Right. It is a lot. And I will say, I found the most interesting article about migraines. And y'all, I will post this to our social media platforms. But if you just kind of think about migraines and just want to know a little bit more about them in general, you've got to read this article. It just goes back to how women have always suffered from migraines and how it became a sexist issue and how it was labeled the housewife, disease and attention seeking. I'm gonna tell you, it was informative and as a female, irritating all at the same time. Yeah. It was I wanted to read it and then I didn't want to read it, and I wanted to read it and then I didn't want to read it, and I was
was
intrigued.
It published by a man?
I don't know the answer to that question. Let's see here.
I'm just joshing you, but I feel like it may be written by a man.
Well, it very well could be, but it was really just amazing to read the article. I just sat there and learned a little bit, of course, but was just
definitely
intrigued.
Post it,
No, it was by Lauren Sharkey.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was published by BBC and the Health Gap. And Why We Don't Know More About Migraines is the title of it, but I'll post it so that way if you want to read it, you can.
Awesome. So a lot of people are probably asking themselves, well, what is Botox and how does it work? Botox is actually a man-made drug, and it does come from a toxin produced by a bacteria called Clostridium botulinum. And it's a botulinum toxin, and it's a neurotoxin that is one of the most poisonous biological substances known. And yes, this is the same toxin as botulism that causes life-threatening food poisoning. If I understand correctly, this is usually you can get it from severely old canned foods.
Correct. Yes.
So what Botox does when it's converted into medicinal purposes, it blocks neuromuscular transmissions by binding the receptor sites on motor or sympathetic nerve terminals and inhibiting the release of acetylcholine. Acetylcholine acts as one of the most prominent neurotransmitters in both the central and peripheral nervous system. And when injected intramuscularly or via IM, Botox produces partial chemical denervation of the muscle, resulting in a localized reduction in muscle activity. There is evidence that the re-innervation of the muscle may occur, causing reversing muscle denervation produced by Botox. And this makes sense because you have to go back for treatments every 3 months.
Right.
There are some pros and cons that we'll talk about later on.
When you want to get Botox, the question is well, what do I expect? And when the Botox enters those nerve endings at the injection sites, it, pretty much blocks chemicals that are involved with pain. And so if you're blocking that, then the pain signals don't go to the brain and therefore you don't have migraines, which is, my dumbed down version of what Rosa just said. So the Botox injections themselves are pretty much painless. Some patients complain of small stinging or maybe a little burning sensation with the injection. But the first sessions usually last about 20 minutes. And then after that, only about 15. And during the sessions, doctors inject 31 different sites in 7 areas around the head and neck. So obviously you're injecting multiple places within one site. So maybe your left and right temporal lobes, you'll inject several, different places at that site. And then after treatment, patients can just go about their normal day. They don't have to do anything different. There are 2 things that they're pretty much told not to do, and they're asked to keep their head up, which just means don't lay down for about 4 hours after treatment, and you're not supposed to exercise that day, which I don't think that's bad.
I think that might be a pro.
I mean,
to write in the pros and cons section. That can be a pro.
That could be a pro. After the injections, it usually takes 10 to 14 days to experience relief, sometimes longer. It is very individualized. And there are patients who actually have to go through 3 full treatments. So that's 9 months if you're going every 3 months to reach full effectiveness. So you will stay on your regular migraine regimen until this would reach full efficacy. And then at that time, you can switch to just doing Botox alone if it controls your migraines.
Absolutely. So some of the pros are that they are minimally invasive.
Yes.
I think if we're using this for cosmetic reasons, such as wrinkles, that this would also constitute for migraines as minimally invasive.
Yes.
It's a fast migraine relief, and it's long lasting. I mean, a pill is only going to last so long, where injections are, about up to 3 months. So some of the cons are decreased facial expression. I think we all know this from cosmetic use.
Yes.
Of course, there's going to be temporary pain and redness and soreness at the injection site. I think that, is common with any injection.
We call that an expected effect.
Exactly. It's not a side effect. It's just something that's expected. Patients can develop a droopy eyelid, which typically lasts 1 or 2 weeks and can be treated with prescription eye drops. The serious side effects of Botox that are extremely rare but possible is the spread of the toxin effects. Toxin may affect areas away from the injection site and can cause serious symptoms that include, loss of strength and overall muscle weakness, double vision, blurred vision, the drooping eyelids, hoarseness, or loss of voice. Trouble saying words clearly, loss of bladder control, trouble breathing, and trouble swallowing. And although you may only experience migraines on one side of your head, chances are that you'll have to have injections on the opposite side of the head so that you won't look unsymmetrical.
Yes.
See, my PCP actually does this. He does Botox injections for migraines. And we have brought this conversation up several times. And at first I was okay with it because I thought, generally mine start on the left side, and they kind of stay on the left side.
Right.
So I was like, oh, okay, just a couple of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever on the left side. And then he was like, yeah, but I can't just do it on the left side because then your face won't match symmetrically, because your left side will be kind of paralyzed and then your right side won't, and then you'll look weird. And I'm like,
you'll literally have a good side and a bad side.
And I'd be like, just take pictures on my left. No. And then I was like, wait a minute. First of all, I hate needles. Can give them all day, can draw blood all day, give them to other people all day, no problems. But I personally don't like them in myself.
Sure.
And so when he was like, well, we got to do the right side, I was like, I graciously decline.
Right. You're like, yeah, it was a good thought.
So I was like, so for it, that was a pro. And then that was the con that took me out. I was like,
yeah, well,
I'm going to have to remove myself from the situation.
If you told me and I was taking my medicine, but I was having like these debilitating migraines several times for half the freaking month, I'd be like, stick it. Fine. Do what you got to do.
But this is coming from the person who won't get her eyes checked.
Well, yeah, but that's, I can see. But if, I'm like underneath the covers under my bed with the curtains drawn and the door closed, then that affects my lifestyle, and therefore I would have to do something about that.
We don't care if you're bumping into things. So,
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
I will tell you this. It is cheaper. I know from my PCP, the PCP can do it without insurance. And I remember when we discussed this a couple of years ago, he wanted to charge me $120 out of pocket.
That's not bad.
However, if you are referred to a neurologist, because they're the ones that should be doing any kind of, regular treatment on migraines, seeing that people aren't being referred to the appropriate specialist, it's covered through your insurance.
Yeah, it's FDA approved, which means that insurance will cover it.
So if you go through a neurologist and they prescribe this for you, insurance will pick it up. But I love my PCP, so if I ever decide to do this in the future, I'll just buckle up the 120, because to be honest, that's still cheaper to me than having to pay for the medications that I take.
Well, that and then a specialist copay.
Absolutely.
So I mean, you do have to balance things out there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you have a specialist copay and then you have another, copay on top of that procedure, then that may be your 120.
And then, on top of medications, because, you have to wait for it to take effect and actually work. I mean, there are costs associated with it, so just, I guess you're going to have to pick your poison. Like my PCP is able to do it.
No pun intended there. She didn't realize she did it.
I didn't realize it, but yes, you'll literally just have to pick your poison, whether your PCP is able to do it, pay out of pocket, or whether you'll be referred to the neurologist and your insurance will cover it.
Right. And just because as I was doing research for the Botox with this, I found that Botox is actually FDA approved for more than just headaches.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, what else can it do? That's just like the rabbit hole that we go down. Of course, it can help with facial wrinkles and improving your appearance, but severe underarm sweating.
See, I would do that one.
I'm like,
I wonder if he'd charge me $120.
I don't know. Severe dystonia, which causes like neck and shoulder contractions or like muscle spasms.
Mm-hmm.
Uncontrolled blinking.
Ooh.
Yes.
That I would do that. That would be annoying.
Yeah, it would be. Misaligned eyes or the strabismus, where your eyes don't, one's going one way, one's going the other.
Like cross-eyedness.
Yeah.
Okay.
And overactive bladder.
I knew that one because I used to be a urology nurse.
So yeah. So I'm like, well, it's making its way into medicine slowly, but it does make you pause when you're like, well, you're going to inject me with what?
Yeah, because we all know that it's a toxin. So of course, when it first came out and, it was being used cosmetically, which we all know that most cosmetic procedures aren't covered by insurance anyway.
Right.
But I guess, that kind of opened the door for the FDA to say, hey, maybe there is something
if it's safe
here.
for this, what else can we use it for?
Exactly. As always, you can find our references on our website, thenursingpostpodcast.com, and you can subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, leaving your thoughts, comments, and suggestions there. And as always, we want to thank you so much for supporting and listening to The Nursing Post.